So my talk today is called Lighten Up and Get Serious. And where this comes from is sometimes in any spiritual pathway, it can be a little confusing about how you're supposed to be, because on the one hand, we're talking about everything is very sacred and serious and so forth. On the other hand, it's like, hey, lighten up, enjoy life. So how do you know when to do what, or which one is appropriate, or, how do we look at things? What's the best way to look at things, Is it okay to laugh in church? Well, it is here, but there are some churches it's not, right? It just would be frowned upon, because this is God's business, and God's business is very serious. I don't think God's a serious guy or woman or girl or whatever he, she is. Because, really, is this the work of a serious artist? I was reading a thing by Ram Dass this morning. He was talking about your physical body is a sacred space. I said, yeah, it is, but it's also got, like, hair in odd places, and parts of it are misshapen, and over time, it gets kind of weirder and weirder. So I can get that it's sacred, but if I don't have a sense of humor about it, I'll just get depressed, right? I saw a thing online the other day, have your yoga pants ever been to yoga? And in some cases, the answer is clearly no, right? So, this is a sign from Florida. Now, it is true that during mating season, the alligators are much more aggressive and assertive. And they do have warning signs around, but the bottom was added by someone else. But it's probably good advice. I was playing golf one time, and there were 3 or 4 gators right by the water hole, by the water hazard. And one of the guys hit a ball about 10 feet from one of the gators. And I said, you going to take a drop on that, or what are you going to do? He says, no, I'm going to get it. I'm going to get it. And he's like, he's going to run up, and the gator goes like that, and he just, no, I'll take a drop. I'll take a drop. I'm good. I'm good. So we tithed that ball to the gators. This is a headline, actual headline. Woman in sumo wrestler suit assaulted her ex-girlfriend in gay pub after she waved at a man dressed as a Snickers bar. Now, should I take this seriously, or should I take it as something humorous and lighten up, Because it sounds like there's probably a lot of human sadness involved in this case, and yet it's hard not to see the absurdity in it. I mean, how many of you have been in this same situation? Yeah, one hand over here, yeah. Yeah, except it was a Mars bar, right? But yeah, I mean, the human condition is really an interesting thing, because we do get into some really absurd situations, don't we? And if we don't have a sense of humor about it, it's very hard to get through. Yet at the same time, we want to recognize the sacred nature of everything, even a situation like this. So you could rewrite this from a spiritual standpoint, saying God in sumo wrestler suit assaulted God in a gay pub after God waved at God dressed as a Snickers bar. Just as true, right? Just as true. So, but we have to get serious, about things. That's not one of my cats. None of that. They were, by the way, very upset with me when I got home yesterday smelling like dog. Because I had been very involved with many of the dogs there, and petting and all that. I got a kiss from Darby, and I suggested next year we have a champagne room back in the back could raise a lot more money. Tom Robbins wrote this. Albert Camus wrote that the only serious question is whether to kill yourself or not. Tom Robbins wrote that the only serious question is whether time has a beginning and an end. Camus clearly got up on the wrong side of the bed, and Robbins must have forgotten to set the alarm. There is only one serious question, and that is, who knows how to make love stay? Answer me that, and I will tell you whether or not to kill yourself. Now, this quote is a rich combination of humor and poignancy, because all the other stuff that we think is important is really when we're distracted from or forgetting that all that matters is how do we make love stay? How do we be the love? Everything else is secondary. And a lot of times we have trouble with humor, with being light, because we feel so burdened by the lack of love. We get very serious, you know. We feel wounded, we feel bitter, we feel betrayed. And we lose sight of what's really going on. Who knows how to make love stay? Who knows how to be together lightly? My dad, who had a pretty good sense of humor, although he was also very depressed much of the time, clinically depressed many times. But whenever we would drive by the cemetery, he would point over and say, you know what's in there, son? A whole bunch of serious people. If you don't know how to laugh and enjoy life, you'll get there a lot sooner than if you do. There's a saying that angels can fly because they take themselves lightly. They're not carrying around the baggage of not feeling like not enough, or regrets, or guilt, or shame that we often carry forward into our experiences of life, and we begin weighted down. A lot of long quotes today. Aldous Huxley in the book Island said, "It's dark because you are trying too hard. Lightly, child, lightly. Learn to do everything lightly. Yes, feel lightly even though you're feeling deeply. Just lightly let things happen and lightly cope with them. I was so preposterously serious in those days. Lightly, lightly. It's the best advice ever given me. So throw away your baggage and go forward. There are quicksands all about you, sucking at your feet, trying to suck you down into fear and self-pity and despair. That's why you must walk so lightly. Lightly, my darling." It's a challenge to walk lightly in this world. It's a challenge because so many just don't know how to do it. And, you know, we all tend to insist on our own version of reality. We all tend to insist that the way we see the world is the way it is, and anyone else that doesn't see it that way needs to either be converted or destroyed. My way or the highway. And we feel perfect. In fact, we often feel we're doing others a favor to say that, to try to encourage them to see the world. What are you so happy about? Don't you know how terrible things are? Can I be happy when things are terrible? Well, if I can't, I'll never be happy, because things are always terrible. Somewhere, to someone, in some kind of a life. You know, it's said today that that when they do these large-scale measures of happiness, that often fewer people are happy in the United States than used to be, and they say possibly one of the reasons is we hear so much more bad news than we used to. You know, with the instantaneous nature of communication and the broad access we have to all these different channels of information, and they tend to report largely on things going wrong, you know, because that's how you draw eyeballs, by the way. There's been several attempts over the last few decades to start good news organizations, and they've all failed. to attract any enough advertising or enough viewers or enough readers to sustain them, because we're not so interested in that. You know, I say it's sort of like similar when you're driving down the highway. When does the traffic back up? You know, when there's a wreck. It doesn't back up because people are slowing down to admire how well the traffic's flowing. We would never think to stop. Let's just pull over and, wow, look how well everything's going today on the highway. Look, the other lanes are all moving along at the speed limit, and our lanes are going great. You don't see that. When everything's going okay, we just tend to keep going. When something's wrong, we stop and check it out. That's an evolutionary trait. So, breaking news, right? Get your attention, focus you in. Everything's you know, actually, there are a couple of channels I've seen where the breaking news thing is always on the screen. They're talking about something that happened 3 months ago, but it's breaking news. New development today. Someone else had an opinion. So if we get into that realm of feeling like that's the reality that exists because we're bombarded with it, then what do? We insist that others see that reality too. And we don't like it when they don't. So there's a lot of people in that kind of a reality. And it's not just because of news, it's because of a lot of reasons. But people that feel like, you know, there's just so many things wrong, how can you possibly enjoy life? There was a fellow running for public office I saw in the news this week, and I think it was a local or a statewide election somewhere. And he was complaining about all the attention being given to the World Cup. And he said he really believed that the World Cup was being promoted in the United States by the government to take our mind off all that was wrong. That people should not be playing or watching games. We should be attending to all the problems full time. Yeah, I'll vote for him. But see, I'm sure that within his own constellation of experience and interpretations of what he's experienced, that seems like a perfectly reasonable stance to take. You know, he's not coming to my next party. And it's not that so it's not like you have to make a decision between seeing the need and being involved or enjoying life. You can do both. You can find ways to do both. You don't want to get buried in either. You don't want to be completely not looking at what's going on, I don't think. But you don't want to become so immersed in it that it kind of takes you over, because it will. There's so much need out there. If your goal, we often talk about our goal is to transform the planet or change the world for the better. And if you take that too seriously, in my opinion, it can become like impossible. There's so much to do. You could just spend all day trying to get animals adopted and never get it done. So how do you deal with the other issues of the world as well? Well, the answer is partly we have to trust and know the best. That's what this teaching is. It says we learn to trust and we learn to know the best, so that we are a greater contributor to what is possible and that we are an influence to others in a positive, uplifting way. And that's not an easy thing to do sometimes. But it's also a recognition of what is possible, what we can do. I'm not responsible for the whole planet. Neither are you. Maggie isn't responsible to make sure all the animals in Simi Valley that need adopting get adopted. There's lots of people working on that. And if we take on too much responsibility, our soul cringes. It doesn't like it. Your soul wants to dance. It wants to be free. It wants to love. It wants to contribute, but it wants to contribute from a place of fullness. Because another problem, we get kind of caught up in that world of not enough, that world of ain't it awful, that world of, oh my God, look what's happening now, is that we become so diminished in the process. And when you feel diminished, you get angry. You get frustrated, you get angry, you get upset. You become very judgmental of others who, look, they're not doing anything about it at all. At least I'm sitting here watching TV and complaining. But it's not always easy to see which direction to go to. If you were to walk down the street and people were to be able to see right through the physical appearance to your soul and the way your soul is getting to live in the world, would you get all tens? Are you living fully? Are you enjoying life? Are you enjoying life and contributing in some way? Contributing can be participating. People that showed up to help with the festival yesterday. People that help here every week. Contributing can be giving money. Contributing can be having conversation. Contributing can be being the person who's willing to uplift the conversation, even if it means the others aren't happy with you. Being the person that says, hey, can we change the subject and talk about what's possible instead of what's wrong? Is that okay? And if it isn't, leave the conversation. It's not your conversation. Be really clear about what's yours to do. If it's yours to do, it'll resonate in your heart. It doesn't, I don't just mean to tug at your heart. I mean really resonate in it. That you'll feel a sense of, oh boy, this is something I really want to get involved in. Years ago when I was in law enforcement, I was fairly new in it, and I knew I was moving. I was leaving where I started in Maryland. I was moving to Florida. And I had a conversation with a couple of people that I respected pretty much. And because there were a couple of options. You could go to what they call a country club department, which was a department somewhere in the suburbs with a very low crime rate. Or you could go down and work in Miami or in downtown Fort Lauderdale or something like that in a more active kind of a role. And this fellow, we'd been to college together and worked uniform police in Maryland together, and really a smart guy, great sense of ethics. He said, Jim, I know you too well. If you don't go where you're most needed, you'll be really unhappy. Take on the biggest challenge you can. And it's no challenge to make left turns in a safe community for 8 hours a day. So I went to Dade County, and we had the highest crime rate in the country at that time. And I was a little scared. I know my family was uncomfortable with it. But I was so rewarded for doing that and having an opportunity to make a difference. And see a lot of stuff I never want to see again. It was part of the deal. And that's not for everybody. And there's nothing wrong with being a police officer in another place. But my point is, each of us has to know enough about ourselves to see, where am I most needed? Where can I be the most effective? Where can I be the most fulfilled myself? And the answer, that will probably be the same place where you can do the most good. Because self-fulfillment and the opportunity to really contribute tend to mirror one another. It's when you're not doing what you could be doing that you feel diminished. And we don't like to be reminded when we're not doing what we could be doing by other people that are doing it. So that's where you see a lot of resentment toward people that are giving of themselves in some way. When you're really connecting in that way, you're not really giving of yourself in the sense of sacrifice. You're expressing yourself from a sense of, could be even joy. People say, how was it to be a police officer? I said, I loved pretty much every minute of it once I get out of the station. Because you had all the internal politics and stuff. But once you get out, it was just you and the bad guys. That was great. It really was. Because, the roles were pretty clearly defined. There wasn't, it was a pretty clear universe out there in terms of who was there for what reason. And I got really clear when I got into this teaching, I was a cop, that I was part of the consequence that those folks had drawn me in somehow. So when you're taking someone to jail, if you've never done this, let me tell you what it's like. You're taking someone to jail who has done, you know they've done something that they need to go to jail. At least you have probable cause. So it's a good arrest from that standpoint. And what'll happen is quite often they'll say, if you weren't here, I wouldn't be having this problem. And some version of that, it's like, because people that find themselves in that position as often as not, or probably more often than not, are at war with themselves inside. And they're not very good at taking responsibility for their lives, for whatever reason. And I could really, sympathize with that and empathize with it to a degree. So I would just say to them, hey, I'm only here because of you. I get in that car and the radio tells me where to go. I don't get to choose. So I am the consequence of your consciousness. Imagine that you're sitting in the back seat, handcuffed behind your back, and the cop is telling you, I'm the consequence of your consciousness. And they would go, oh, God. Or something I can't repeat. And I say, no, really, think about it. Think about it. If, I just responded to a situation that you created. How is this my fault? And I say, you want a cigarette? I always carried cigarettes for him. I didn't smoke, but I always carried cigarettes for him. You want a cigarette? This would be the last one. You can't smoke in jail. And by the time we got to jail, we were usually conversant. Because they would say, most cops, because this was not their first day at the rodeo, almost all the time, most cops don't, they're really nasty. I said, well, I like to go home relaxed as often as possible. And what would end up happening is they'd call me when they got out and they'd become an informant. They'd say, I know this guy's going to get arrested. I want you to be the one to arrest him. And all these other guys say, how do you get all these informants? I said, I'm nice to them. No, really, how do you do it? So I treat them with respect. I give them a cigarette. I don't take it personally. No, really, how do you do it? Because they can only see it happening in a coercive way, for the most part, So, but it was really about. I was at that time in my life, and where I was in perfect synchronization with what I should have been doing. It fit. So it didn't exhaust me. It didn't diminish me. It didn't wear me down like it did so many others. Because it was synchronistic, actually. And then later, I changed, so my career changed. But I think a lot of the people that are in careers, any career, if you're in a career and it's not your career, how can you help but be exhausted at the end of the day? How can you help but, resent the people that hand you your paycheck? They did a survey back about 10 years ago that said 84% of Americans are in the wrong job. When you study what their true talents are and true inclinations, most people are in jobs that they needed the money. They took the job that made the first offer or paid the best or whatever, rather than getting into alignment with where they could really give their gift. And they found similar study. I know Tom Vacola, who a member of our community, talks about this, where 70-some% of managers were disengaged from their work. So you got 84% in the wrong job and 74% of the supervisors and managers disengaged. That sounds like a great workplace, doesn't it? It's amazing anything gets done. So it is about being connected. So it matters how you see yourself. See, it's not so much about how do others see me, although that's what most people play to. It matters how you see yourself. And a mentally healthy person, by the way, will tend to see themselves as being a little better than they are. Kind of interesting. You think it would be the other way, that you should see yourself totally accurately. No, actually, if you see yourself a little better than you are, you'll tend to be a better person. But it's when you see yourself as worse than you are that it becomes really destructive. So part of lightening up is being okay with who you are. Where if somebody makes a joke about you, you're not devastated. Or if somebody questions something you say or something you do and says, no, you need to do it this way, you're not devastated. You will say, oh, really? Okay, tell me more. See? That's a big part of how we behave in the world is can I be, when I'm okay with myself, I can lighten up. It's when I'm not okay with myself that I'm constantly on guard. You know, what are you going to say? You're going to say something to embarrass me? You're going to say something to put me down? So they become, what do you have to do? You have to become very manipulative to keep that from happening. And when you're trying to manipulate other people, you're not being authentic. And when you're not being authentic, you don't feel good about yourself, and it's hard to have a sense of humor, except the kind of sense of humor that's only about cutting other people down. Which isn't really a sense of humor, that's really a sense of woundedness. So this teaching, if it's about anything, Ernest Holmes says the teaching of the science of mind is about spiritual freedom. He says that many times throughout his writings. Spiritual freedom. To be free. When you're free, you're light. You're not burdened by fear. You're not burdened by concern about what other people are thinking about you. You're able to be who you are and to find where is it that works for me? Where can I be, as Dorian's personal statement says, where can I sing the song of my soul? And everybody here has got a different song. Where can you sing the song of your soul? And it doesn't mean you have to turn your whole life upside down. It means to find avenues within where you are. And maybe some changes come down the road, but for initially, find some places within yourself where you can just be a more complete version of you. Speak your truth. Be the love that you are. Show compassion for yourself first. And be able to say yes to the world as it is. Joseph Campbell says, the world's a mess. It's perfect. It's always been a mess. It always will be a mess. Your job is not to fix the world. Your job is to learn to live in it and to teach others how to do that. How do we live in this world as it is? Without making it conditional for our happiness that the world change. That's setting yourself up. It would be better, and it is better, to think of it conditional for the world that you change. To become more authentic, more empowered, more loving. Even if there's just one little speck of that energy on the planet, we're okay. So lighten up and get serious and find the balance between the two. Be serious about lightening up. Thank you, and namaste.